state the domain of, and we have ourselves a rational function, y equals, and on the top we have 5x minus 6, on the bottom, square root of x squared minus 5x minus 24. So for a rational function, the domain is always supposed to be all real numbers except where the denominator is equal to 0. Okay, so we can't have the denominator equal to 0. Now, the fact that it's a square root in the denominator or the square root can't be negative, so square root has to be greater than or equal to 0. However, we just said that the bottom can't be equal to 0, so we're going to actually take off the equals sign here and make that just greater than 0. So what we have here is x squared minus 5x minus 24 has to be greater than 0. Okay? So it can't be equal to 0 because that would make dividing by 0, and it can't be less than 0 because then that will make an imaginary number down in the bottom. So remember, with a quadratic inequality, you have to actually solve the quadratic equation, so x squared minus 5x minus 24 equals 0, just to get the critical values, the boundary points of our interval that's going to work. So let's go ahead and factor. So I got an x and an x. Has to multiply up to negative 24, add up to negative 5. So I need a negative 8 and a plus 3. So my critical values, these are not the answers, these are just critical values. X equals 8 and negative 3. So let's go ahead and put those things on a number line. There's 0, let's say this is 8, and a negative 3. Okay, so I need to see if, well, first of all, do this 8 and negative 3 get open circles or closed circles? Well, since the original inequality sign was just simply greater than, I need open circles. Now I've got one of two things I can do here. With a quadratic inequality, if the x squared term is positive and it's on the left-hand side, you can use the shortcut, and this is great OR, so therefore it's going to be on the outside of these numbers. It's an OR inequality. Alternatively, I can just use a test value, and how about I test something like 0, because that should be the easiest one to test, and plug in 0 and see if it is greater than 0 or less than 0 or whatever. So 0 squared minus 5 times 0 minus 24. Those, of course, will cancel out. That is equal to negative 24. Is that greater than 0? No, it's not. So I can't include the interval that includes 0. I have to include everything outside of that. So again, it's the OR inequality. So our answer here is in interval notation from negative infinity to negative 3. It gets parentheses, not a bracket, because it's got an open circle. Union, parentheses, 8 to infinity. And there's the domain of this funky rational function.